Greetings viewers, EricTheCarGuy here, back with another tool review for you. This time I'm talking about my new Sunex 1-ton engine stand as opposed to, and this is really not a fair comparison, my Harbor Freight half-ton engine stand. I'm only talking about these two things because I went from this to this. I recently pulled the engine and transmission out of my 1982 Mustang in preparation for the insertion into my 1979 Ford Fairmont. So we have this out on the stand ready to be disassembled and work with. Now I have had an engine on the Harbor Freight version before. In fact, I had an LS engine on this for quite a bit. And I've got to say, just the LS, and that's an aluminum block and everything, this thing was quite droopy. I mean, it did the job, but it was working hard just with an aluminum block LS. This, I wouldn't put a big block on this. But this, I would. And this has a similar handle that you can use to reposition the engine if you like. It's not as easy to move, but it does do that. More expensive models have a hand crank that makes this a bit easier, but with all this weight on here, it is what it is. And sometimes you need to go in here with a lady slipper to move it around. I've got to say, I do have a few critiques on this, or disappointments if you will, and that is when I went to put this onto the engine stand from the engine hoist, it was really difficult to try to get this thing in there and try to navigate it. It was actually extremely difficult, and I wish it was easier to mount this. I mounted this on the engine and then I brought it into this top mount here from the engine crane. And it was a little cumbersome. I had to do some fancy footwork in order to make it happen, but that's definitely something to be aware of. However, unlike its counterpart over there, this one can fold up similar to an engine crane. Now I'm not going to fold the legs up on it now because I've got an engine on it, but you can fold these legs up in a similar way. You just pull the pins, pull them out, and lift it up. The other thing I noticed with this is the casters are pretty noisy. With the weight on them, they're less so, and I've lubricated them since then, but when you first get them, they're pretty noisy. They work fine, they roll easy. It's just they were squeaking and making all kinds of noise. Also, as with my engine crane, I had some difficulty with the assembly. The instructions were not all that clear, so I just basically ended up figuring it out on my own, rather than using the assembly instructions. Another thing I noticed when this thing arrived in its box, it was still full of a lot of that shot that they have, that they use after you weld something. They just blast it with shot, so there was some of that stuff going all over the place. So there was, the final finish wasn't all that great. But as far as function goes, it's sitting up here nicely. As I said, I almost wish I'd gotten a hand crank type so that I could easily turn the engine around and position it the way I want to position it, because this is just a small block. This can support a big block, but I imagine in doing so you're going to be fighting it quite a bit more because big blocks are a bit heavier than these small blocks. So that's definitely something to take into consideration. But if you're ready to step up to working on big blocks and things like that, I would definitely use this engine stand over the Harbor Freight. The Harbor Freight does work. This would work fine for like your smaller kind of engines. This would probably work fine. But you start to get up to like this size engine, I really don't think that this one's going to hold up, and it doesn't seem nearly as stable as this 1-ton here. With this engine on here, I have no fear whatsoever moving this around at all. And it moves around nicely. I also like the fact that it has sort of a backward angle to it, whereas the Harbor Freight is just straight across. So when you put weight on the Harbor Freight, it tends to dip forward. This one, because it's already canted back a little bit, it sort of settles into place and is slightly backwards, or the weight is slightly shifted towards this part, which supports the weight better anyway. So it's a good design, and it does support a lot more weight than a Harbor Freight does. The 1-ton, the Sunex engine stand, as compared to the half-ton Harbor Freight engine stand I used to use. Honestly, there's no comparison between the two. In fact, it's not fair at all. However, I am glad I graduated up to this. One of the things I forgot to mention earlier is I like the working height. Also, the fact that the legs fold up and store away nicely when you're not using it. That's another nice feature, but it was a little cumbersome to use and get it hooked up, and I also wish I'd gotten the version with the hand crank. That would have been great. Outside of that, I'm going to enjoy rebuilding this 302 that I have here in front of me using this engine stand. That said, I post tool reviews every other Wednesday, so stop back and see me then. If you have automotive questions, I'd ask that you head over to EricTheCarGuy.com. There's a welcome video there to tell you about the features we have to help you with those things. If you wish to connect with me socially, there are links in the description to my Google+, Facebook, Twitter, also Instagram. Close each of my videos with be safe, have fun, stay dirty, and don't forget to play with your tools. I'll see you next time.